Welcome, everyone. I'm Kathy Gann with the Denver Theosophical Society. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and then we'll get started here shortly. Okay, can you all see the PowerPoint? Okay, perfect. Okay, well, tonight's talk is on service, the fastest path to brotherhood. Probably we all remember the summer of 2020. It's one of those years that will live in infamy. As you remember, I've got somebody coming in. Okay, as you remember, we had the COVID lockdown started in March of 2020. Also in 2020, that was in March, that was when police burst into the home of an African American emergency medical technician, Breonna Taylor, and shot her in her apartment. She was African American. They were actually after her boyfriend, and for some reason, they shot her in her apartment. People went wild over that, and there was a great deal of distress and unrest in the country. And then only 3 months later, that was when the George Floyd killing took place in Minneapolis. After that, as you probably recall, even though everybody was in face masks and it was a little scary to be in crowds, nevertheless, over the summer of 2020, there were many, many anti-police protests, some peaceful, some not so much. Not just here in the United States, but this is a problem that's not restricted to the United States. It's happening in a lot of countries. And so there were protests all over the world, including London. On a particular day in the summer of 2020, there was a protest to take place, anti-police, or it may have been a Black Lives Matter protest in a particular area of London. And there were four men called the Four Dads, Patrick, Lee, Chris, and Jermaine. They all saw themselves as father figures, and in fact, Patrick is not only a father, but a grandfather. They decided to go ahead and attend the protest in London. Their thinking was sometimes at protests like that, people, particularly young people, will get very caught up in the heat and the passion of the moment, and they'll do things that they wouldn't ordinarily do. And then it's a mistake that they make that haunts them the rest of their lives, may even destroy their lives if they end up really hurting or killing someone and going to prison. So they thought if they could just show up as father figures, maybe they could prevent something like that and prevent somebody from making some kind of rash action. So that was their idea as they went into the protest. When they arrived, and this photo that you see here, this is Patrick. And mind you, Patrick is a personal trainer, so he's in really good shape, really good physical condition. When they arrived, they saw what was happening. What had happened was there was a white counter protester who was in the crowd stirring up trouble, and a number of the black protesters had gotten into a conflict with the counter protester. The counter protester was down on the ground and was being hit and pummeled and beaten, possibly kicked, and things didn't look very good for him. So without even thinking further, Patrick and the other three dads ran toward the man. Patrick picked him up, threw him over his shoulder in what he called a fireman's carry, and ran away from the crowd towards some police officers. He figured he could deposit this man with the police officers, explain what happened, and they could take it from there. So the other three dads kind of surrounded Patrick and the man that he was carrying, and they did run to the police officer. Patrick said, as I was carrying him, he was still receiving blows. It didn't cross my mind that he might hold prejudices. We just wanted to get him out of there. In other words, Patrick wasn't looking at his belief system or his political beliefs. He wasn't even looking at color of skin. He just knew that guy was in trouble and needed to be taken out of there. Some iconic photos were taken of Patrick and the other dads as they ran, carrying this man out. And pretty soon, the story went viral immediately afterwards. Pretty soon, Patrick and the other dads are invited for speaking engagements. And long story short, something good ended up coming out of it. They ended up founding this organization called United to Change and Inspire. If you'd like to see that, their website is weareutcai.org. As Patrick thought about it later, he said, if we hadn't done that, a very different narrative would have been told about that day. But as it was, it's a good story that gets told about that day. So it all turned out well. And in fact, it turned out pretty much as they had planned. It was exactly what they had in mind. I'm starting with this story because stories like this and experiences like this remind us of something that Theosophy has taught for nearly 150 years, and that is that brotherhood is not an aspiration, it's a fact in nature. And service is the most direct way to perceive that fact of nature. When we talk about brotherhood, we're talking about familyhood. It has nothing to do with gender, of course. It has to do with treating people, all people, like they are beloved family members. So the Theosophical Society has three objects for which it exists. The first one has to do with brotherhood. It is to form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity. So this is the first and most important reason why the Theosophical Society, and in fact the whole Theosophical movement, exists. Now, two things stand out about that statement. First, the universal brotherhood of humanity. You notice that this statement does not ask us to create that. Inherent in this statement is an understanding that it already exists. The brotherhood of humanity already exists as a fact in nature. Our marching orders are to form a nucleus. The other thing that stands out is it says to form a nucleus, not the nucleus. There are many nuclei of the brotherhood of humanity, so the Theosophical movement is only one of those. This is not some kind of a poetic ideal. It's a metaphysical truth. Theosophy teaches that all life is rooted in the one life, and that beneath the surface differences such as race, creed, gender, or even cultural differences, there is this single spiritual essence that expresses itself through countless forms. And Annie Besant put it so beautifully. She said, "Brotherhood is a fact in nature, not an ideal." So if unity is the underlying reality, then service is the natural expression of that unity. When we serve, we're acting from the recognition, even if we only feel it very dimly, that the suffering of another person is not separate from our own. And the law of karma reinforces this understanding. Every thought, every action, every gesture of goodwill ripples outward toward the whole, into the whole. So service isn't something that's merely moral, it is metaphysical and energetic cooperation with the harmony of the universe. In other words, when you are altruistically helping another, unselfishly helping another, you could very realistically say that the force is with you. Literally and truly, the force of the universe is with you. So why do we say that service is the fastest path to brotherhood? A number of reasons. Service shifts the consciousness from I to we, from separation to unity. When we serve, we momentarily step out of the narrow circle of self. We bypass the personality. And in Theosophy, of course, the personality is that mortal part of us that does not survive after death. It's the physical body, the emotional body, and the mental body. So our physical, our emotional, and our mental. So that's the personality, and that's the part of us that is temporary. So when we serve, we temporarily step out of that narrow little circle of thinking about our own personality. So the personality, with its preferences, its fears, and its judgments, loosens its grip on us. And in that moment, something deeper, or we could say something higher, shines through. And Sri Ram is one of my favorite theosophical authors, and he wrote, "The spirit of service is the true expression of the self within." And he was referring to the higher self or the divine self. Service also awakens the heart. Compassion is not developed through theory, it grows through action. When we help another another person or another being, it might be an animal or it might be some element in nature, then our heart recognizes a kinship that the mind maybe can't see or our intellect may actually still be debating, but the heart recognizes this kinship, this brotherhood. Probably some of you have heard of the teacher Jiddu Krishnamurti, and he once said, "The moment you have in your heart this extraordinary thing called love, you will discover that for you, the world is transformed. And service is one of the most reliable ways to awaken that love." Another thing is that service creates direct human contact. It's not an abstraction. Brotherhood is not an abstraction. It's lived in relationship. When we serve, whether we're offering food or listening deeply or maybe comforting someone in pain, the walls between us dissolve. We see the human being before us. We don't see the labels. It was just like Patrick. We don't see those outer differences. We don't stop to ask about them. We just see the human being as they really are. And then service aligns us with the higher self. That is that deepest, we could say highest, I like to say deepest, truest essence of who we really are. Theosophy teaches that the higher self is inherently altruistic. Every act of service strengthens our alignment with that higher self, which we could also call an inner divinity. It is a spiritual practice as transformative as meditation or study. And those who are familiar with the Theosophical movement will know that a Theosophical spiritual path, we always say it's a three-legged stool of study, meditation, and service. So service is fully 1/3 of that formula. And I've got a few pictures sprinkled throughout here, and I'm just going to spend a little time showing you because I can't do a talk like this and not show you some of the service projects that have taken place in the Theosophical Society and the Theosophical Order of Service. I'm going to start with this picture, and you see, I forgot that Anne was going to be here. This is Anne Sermons Gillis. She is the Vice President of the Theosophical Order of Service. And most of you know Ron Liggett, a member of our group. He's on the call here tonight. This is Barbara Reef. She is a former member of the Denver group. And here's Dave Wilson, also a former member of this group. So what we did in July 2024 at the Summer National Gathering of the Theosophical Society, that's its national annual conference, the Theosophical Order of Service was given an evening where we could coordinate an evening of service. And we cooperated with this group to make what we called sweet cases. Those are these bright blue duffel bags that you see here. These are given to children who are being removed from their home by a social worker for their own safety. And as you can imagine, that's often in an emergency setting. The kids are handed a big black trash bag and they're told that they have 10 or 15 minutes to gather up any belongings that they want to take with them. They don't know if they're coming back, they don't know what's happening, but they have 10 or 15 minutes to stuff that bag with as many things as they can. They're usually going for the toys. They're not thinking about grabbing a jacket. So we put in these bags a teddy bear, a soft little polar fleece blanket, coloring book, crayons, and a little hygiene kit, just really basic. It had a comb and a toothbrush. And that still left the vast majority of the bag available so that they could put their things in something nice and have a bag lovingly decorated just for them. And so here you see people are decorating this little flat panel that then attaches to the bag via Velcro. And this is Justin Tanksley. He is one of the board members of the Theosophical Order of Service. And this is a frequent volunteer around the Olcott campus, Chian. And they took these bags all, gosh, I don't know what we had, maybe 50 or 100 of them. I don't recall. We had quite a few. They took them to an agency in the area called Kids Above All. And those are the frontline workers who will actually be entering the homes and handing those bags to the kids. Now, moving down to the lower left, these are volunteers from the Wheaton-Olcott area. That is the area where the Theosophical Society has its national center in Wheaton, Illinois. And a bunch of these volunteers, this one, and there's Chian again, and this person went over to a group called Feed My Starving Children and spent a few hours volunteering there, putting together their specialty food products. They do amazing work. They put together specialty nutrition products for people who are literally dying of starvation. And by starvation, I mean that in the technical medical sense. I don't mean it in the sense of, gee, I'm really hungry, I missed supper last night, but true starvation, which is a medical emergency. And you can't just hand somebody in that condition a sandwich and say, here, now you'll be fine. The body needs to be brought back slowly and it needs very, very specialized nutrition. So they make different products for different age groups. So there's something special for infants, something special for older children, something for adults, and something for the elderly. And then they ship those products all over the world. So it's quite an operation they have there. These are members from the Houston group. This picture is actually from a few years ago. They love to go down to the food bank and volunteer a few hours of their time. They would get together on a Saturday and go down and just do whatever the food bank needed done. Within a couple hours or so, they could make a real impact. Here you see we are back again at the Summer National Conference, but this time this was pre-COVID. We used to do these pre-COVID, then we took a break during COVID because we couldn't get together for the national conference. So back in 2018, we offered a number of service projects. People could choose what they wanted to do, and they spent the afternoon doing that. This was an afternoon spent at the Humanitarian Service Project, which is close to the TS headquarters. The project was started by, this is Floyd Kettering. It was started by his wife, Carol Kettering, in 1979 on the Olcott campus, on the campus of the Theosophical Society. And at that time, they were just putting food into the hands of seniors in the area who didn't have enough to eat, particularly at Christmas. It grew and grew and grew until it is now its own 501c3. It's no longer a TOS project. Carol has passed on, but Floyd, who serves as the treasurer of the Theosophical Society, now manages the Humanitarian Service Project. So here I am, and here's the national president of the TS. That's Doug Keene. And I don't know, maybe some of you might recognize some of these people. We had some young, enthusiastic volunteers. It was a lot of fun. And we probably spent 2 hours there bagging up food to be taken to seniors. All right, again, I can't do a talk like this without talking about the Theosophical Order of Service, which was founded by Annie Besant. Annie Besant was the second president of the Theosophical Society internationally. And there was a great clamor at the time among the members, and there was also some instruction from one of the wise teachers who was behind the Theosophical movement. There was a thought that theosophy needed to be made practical. It's not enough to attend talks or talk about it and discuss it in your local groups. It's not enough to study it. It won't be transformative if you only study it. It's very nice and it's useful to study it, certainly. But if you will put it into action and live it, then I always tell people that then it becomes transformative. The motto of the Theosophical Order of Service is a union of those who love in the service of all that suffers. And the TOS exists to help us live theosophy and not merely just study it. It invites us to bring compassion into action. In other words, to make brotherhood visible. Its work spans many fields, and I could have put, any number of photos on here. It's very hard to narrow it down to just a few, but we have many, many animal rescue causes that we help support. This is a local group project from the Philadelphia Lodge, and this project was called Tuesday Afternoons in Philly. What they would do is set up a booth, and you can see that there are other people doing that too. They would set up this booth where they would give clean, fresh socks to homeless people because apparently that is one of the number one most demanded and most needed items among the homeless population. They go through socks really quickly because they're on their feet so much. So fresh, clean socks looks pretty good to a homeless person. So for a long time, they were doing this every Tuesday afternoon, no matter the weather. This photo shows a longtime member, Nelda Samarel, she's a retired hospice nurse. She did a program for the Denver community. So this group did this project, and she showed people how to be truly useful and how to assist someone who is making their transition from living to dying. She actually wrote a little pamphlet called Helping the Dying, which is available on the TOS website. If you want a copy of it, it's at theoservice.org. That's our website, theoservice.org, or that's the website of the Theosophical Order of Service. I believe if you click on publications, that's where you'll find it. So it's available in PDF format, in English and in Spanish. And some of you might recognize one of our members here, Tammy, who volunteered to act as the patient who was transitioning, but I assure you no theosophists were harmed in the making of this program. Nelda was just showing, how to hold the hands and how to be present with the person in a way that's really, truly stabilizing and comforting for the person, kind of without getting in the way and detracting from their process. We included pollinators in our, I guess you could say animal product projects, but also our environmental projects this past year by giving a grant to an organization called Save the Bee. And then for the Summer National Conference in 2025, and we'll do it again in 2026, we gave away wildflower seeds to conference attendees, and that was really popular. There were no seed packets left behind. Everybody took those, and they were quite popular. We've also done a lot of humanitarian work. We sent money to an organization in Gaza when they needed help to help with feeding the community and distributing shelter building supplies and so forth. We've also been sending money to the president of the Theosophical Society in Ukraine. She then distributes it to whoever in the community needs it. Typically, it goes to refugees and displaced citizens who are suffering, because of the war, obviously. Here you see a young woman. She and her husband runs an orphanage in Ukraine. This little fellow that you see that she's holding is blind. I'm sure he's much older now, or several years older now. He was actually left and abandoned at the hospital by his parents because they didn't think that they had the wherewithal to raise a blind child. So he went to this orphanage, and they already had quite a handful. But then when the war broke out, they went ahead and took in more children that were left behind in that way. So I love this quote by Annie Besant. She said, "It's not the magnitude of the task, but the spirit in which it's undertaken that matters." So often in matters like this, it's always the intent, it's always the energy behind it. So again, the TOS exists to help us live Theosophy, not merely study it. And I want to show also some work of the Theosophical Society in America. The TS, I'm just going to refer to it as the TS because that's quite a mouthful. So the TS has long supported the work of the TOS and has always encouraged service as a vital part of spiritual growth. They offer study groups, community programs, educational initiatives, and they also help cultivate the understanding and compassion that naturally leads people to engage in service. One of the founders of the Theosophical Society was Helena Blavatsky, and she said that while the main role of the TS is to make theosophical teachings available and, of course, help people understand them, she said members were also encouraged, even right from the beginning, to get involved in altruistic work. She said theosophical ideas of charity mean personal exertion for others, personal mercy and kindness, personal interest in the welfare of those who suffer, personal sympathy, forethought, and assistance in their troubles or needs. So, right from the beginning, you see that even Madame Blavatsky was talking about service and about actually doing and getting involved in service projects. You can see from some of these pictures that when members get together and do a service project together, something very powerful happens. It's like magic. Shared service builds trust, unity, and purpose. It transforms the society from a study circle into truly a living organism of goodwill. It's like a glue that holds us all together, this camaraderie and the good feelings that come from a shared service project. Again, brotherhood becomes not just a principle that we affirm and we nod and we approve of it, but it's a reality that we experience. So, altruism as a living daily practice. Service does not require that we make grand, dramatic gestures. It begins with the small, the ordinary, the everyday. And we could say there are at least three kinds of service. If we thought about it, I'm sure we could think of more categories, but for now, we'll just categorize these three. So, inward service, such as cultivating goodwill. We could practice patience, for example. I know that's something I'm working on. Holding other people in compassion, meditating on loving kindness. When we do this kind of inner service, especially the meditation and the compassion, it prepares our hearts for outer service. So, outer service might be something very small. It might be just a kind word or lending a patient ear to someone who needs to talk. It might be a spontaneous moment of generosity. It might be volunteering in your local community. Just simple acts like these really ripple outward and create these ripples of harmony that we mentioned earlier. And then there is group service. TOS and TSA groups get together, and when they do that, it really magnifies the impact because you have people combining their energies, and what they create is more than the sum of the parts. When we serve together, again, we strengthen these bonds of brotherhood within the theosophical community, and that gets radiated outward to the community and beyond. I want to just show this picture. I mean, this picture obviously just shows meditation as inward service. This one is another project that the Houston group worked on years ago. They made up these little compassion kits or care kits for the homeless. And here we see Van Lee, one of the Houston members, handing a care kit to this gentleman who was homeless with his dog. And it was just a way of connecting. This was a project that was really popular for a while. That was being done in numerous cities. And then you saw this picture earlier with the suitcases. So the spiritual impact of service is transformation. And by transformation, I mean that in a couple different ways. There's transformation of the individual. Service certainly purifies our motive, it expands our awareness, and it deepens our intuition. It accelerates spiritual evolution because, again, as I said earlier, it aligns us with that higher self or that deepest self within us. It's aligning us with our deepest essence of who we really are, rather than the temporary and more superficial identity with the personality, which is where we're often focused throughout the day. Service accelerates spiritual evolution in that way. And as H.P. Blavatsky wrote, and this really stuck with me, this is something that really, I think, merits some pondering. She said, compassion is no attribute, it is the law of laws. That's quite a statement to say that the basic underlying law of laws of this universe in which we live, or whatever this larger thing is, the multiverse, whatever it is, this bigger thing that we're a part of, the law of laws is compassion. Isn't that, and I think that's an amazing statement. And it really underscores what I said earlier, and I said it kind of humorously, but there's a lot of truth to it, that when we engage in altruistic, meaning unselfish service, this force of compassion, this universal compassion, is truly with us. So when we serve, we are cooperating with the law of laws. And every act of service that we do contributes to the collective awakening of humanity. So when enough individuals are acting from unity, brotherhood becomes much more visible in the world. It's there. If you look for it, you'll see it. You probably see it already. The more we focus on it, the more we'll see it. But it is there. Service is not only the fastest path to brotherhood, it's also the most reliable. So I created the title of this slide, Calling All Agents of Brotherhood, and I did it kind of tongue in cheek with a little bit of humor. And then I realized, wouldn't that make a great title for a TV show, Agents of Brotherhood? We could probably work with that and make something of that. Theosophy teaches that we're all unique expressions of the one life. And the service is the way that we live that truth. It's the bridge between the ideal of brotherhood and the experience of it. It's a bridge between, as we always say, between being and doing. So I'm going to invite each of us to choose one concrete act of service this coming week. Something simple, something sincere. It doesn't have to be big and major. And either begin that practice, or if it's something you're already doing, go ahead and deepen that practice. Start that tomorrow and see what you can find to do in the way of service this coming week. One of my favorite authors in the Theosophical movement is N. Sri Ram, and I love this quote by him. He said, "The true service of humanity arises from the heart that sees no separation." And we talked about that at the beginning with that story about Patrick and the dads. They didn't see separation. They didn't see different skin colors. Didn't see different ideologies. They just jumped in where they were needed. They knew that there was suffering. They knew what to do to alleviate it, and they acted. And it's, as Patrick said later, we have a much better and happier narrative of what happened that day than what it would otherwise have been. My highest hope for this talk is that it might inspire each of us to become instruments of unselfish, altruistic work, and through that, to discover the brotherhood that has always been our truest, deepest nature. So this is kind of a short talk. We have plenty of time for discussion. I'm going to stop the sharing and I will, let's see, I'm going to see if I can stop the recording.